The silence in the VIP room was louder than a gunshot. One wrong move in front of Dante Moretti, the most feared man in New York, usually meant you didn't go home that night. So when the trembling waitress raised her hands, not to surrender, but to make strange, frantic gestures at his confused mother, the entire restaurant froze. The manager turned pale, expecting a hit. The bodyguards reached for their holsters. But what happened next didn't just save a life. It unlocked a dark family secret that would bring the city's criminal underworld to its knees. This is the story of how a single silent greeting changed everything. The rain hammered against the stained glass windows of L'Oubli, a fortress of fine dining nestled in the heart of Manhattan's Tribeca district. It was the kind of place where a bottle of wine cost more than a Honda Civic, and the clientele spoke in hushed tones about mergers, acquisitions, and, occasionally, things that would land them in federal prison. Elise Bennett adjusted her apron, her hands shaking slightly. She had been working at L'Oubli for only 3 weeks. She was 23, invisible, and preferred it that way. With her messy bun and oversized glasses, she did her best to blend into the mahogany paneling. She needed this job. The medical bills for her late sister were still piling up on her kitchen counter, threatening to drown her. "Table 1 is opening up," Claude, the floor manager, hissed into her ear. He was a man who wore too much cologne and treated the staff like indentured servants. "The Moretti party is 5 minutes out. You are back. Wait. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look them in the eye. And for God's sake, Elise, stop trembling." Elise felt the blood drain from her face. The Moretti party. Even in a city of 8 million people, everyone knew the name Dante Moretti. He wasn't just a mob boss. He was an institution. The papers called him the Architect because he had rebuilt the city's organized crime into a sleek, untouchable corporate empire. He was 32, ruthlessly handsome, and rumor had it he hadn't smiled since the turn of the century. I can't take table 1, Claude," Elise stammered, clutching her tray. "Please, put Sarah on it." "Sarah is on break," Claude snapped, smoothing his lapels. "And you will do as you are told, or you will be back on the street tonight." The heavy oak doors swung open. The air in the restaurant seemed to drop 10 degrees. 4 men in dark suits entered first, their eyes scanning the room with the precision of sharks. Then came Dante. He looked exactly like the paparazzi photos, only more terrifying. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But he wasn't alone. On his arm was a tiny, elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a black dress that looked expensive, but dated, and she clutched a beaded purse with white-knuckled intensity. This was Lucia Moretti, the matriarch. Rumors about her were scarce, mostly because Dante guarded her privacy with lethal force. Claude rushed forward, his smile oily and desperate. "Mr. Moretti, Signora Moretti, what an honor! We have the private alcove prepared, just as you requested." Dante didn't look at him. He guided his mother to the chair, pulling it out with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the gun bulge beneath his jacket. The bodyguards took up positions at the perimeter. The restaurant had gone deathly silent. "Water," Dante said. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. "Sparkling for my mother. Scotch for me." "Immediately, sir," Claude bowed. He snapped his fingers at Elise. "Water. Now." Elise rushed to the sidebar, her hands trembling as she filled the crystal glasses. When she returned, Claude was hovering over the table, trying to make conversation with Lucia. "And for the Signora?" Claude asked, leaning in too close to the elderly woman. "Perhaps the veal tonight." "It is exquisite." Lucia stared straight ahead, her eyes glassy. She didn't react. Claude's smile faltered. He cleared his throat and spoke louder, enunciating every syllable as if she were simple. I said, "The veal is good." Dante's hand stopped moving toward his menu. He slowly looked up at Claude. The look was devoid of anger, which made it infinitely scarier. It was the look a butcher gives a piece of meat. "She isn't deaf," Dante said, though he knew she was. He lied to protect her dignity in public, a strange, twisted logic he had maintained for years. He hated people treating her like an invalid. "She is just ignoring you." But Claude, sweating and foolish, doubled down. He assumed the old woman was senile. He leaned right into her face, his voice booming. "Madam, can you hear me?" Lucia flinched. She looked around wildly, confused by the man's aggression, her hands fluttering near her chest. She looked at Dante, her eyes wide with panic. Dante stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every diner in the restaurant stopped eating. 2 bodyguards stepped forward. "Get this clown out of my face," Dante said softly, "before I buy this restaurant just to fire him." Claude turned white. I was only—" "She's terrified," Elise's voice cut through the tension. It was a whisper, but in the silence, it carried like a scream. Dante turned his head slowly. His steel-grey eyes locked onto Elise, who was standing there with the water pitcher, looking like she might faint. "What did you say?" Dante asked. Claude looked ready to strangle her. "Elise, get back to the kitchen." Elise ignored him. She looked past the terrifying man in the suit and focused entirely on the frightened old woman. Elise set the pitcher down. She took a deep breath, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She raised her hands. "Are you okay?" She signed in American Sign Language, ASL. "The man is loud. He is rude. Ignore him." The room went still. Lucia Moretti froze, her eyes locked onto Elise's hands. Slowly, the panic in the old woman's face dissolved, replaced by a look of sheer, heartbreaking wonder. Her trembling hands raised to respond. "He is very loud," Lucia signed back. Her movements arthritic but clear. "Like a donkey." Elise let out a small, involuntary laugh. She signed back. "A donkey in a cheap suit." Lucia's face cracked. For the first time that night, perhaps for the first time in years, the matriarch of the Moretti crime family smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile. "Thank you," Lucia signed. "I was scared. I cannot hear anything. My son, he tries, but he does not know the signs." Dante was staring at Elise. The aggression had vanished from his posture, replaced by a profound confusion. He looked from the waitress to his mother, watching the silent conversation unfold. He had never learned ASL. His father had forbidden it, viewing Lucia's deafness as a weakness to be hidden, not accommodated. Dante had simply paid for caretakers, insulated her, and protected her with violence. He had never realized she was just lonely. "What is she saying?" Dante asked. His voice was no longer commanding. It was hoarse. Elise didn't look at him. She was still focused on Lucia. "She says the manager looks like a donkey," Elise said softly. "And she wants to know if the soup has mushrooms. She is allergic." Dante looked at his mother. Lucia nodded at him, pointing to the menu, and then shaking her head. Dante looked back at Elise. For a moment, the mask of the crime boss slipped. He looked like a man who had been trying to solve a puzzle for 20 years, only for a stranger to walk in and solve it in 10 seconds. "You know sign language," Dante stated. "My sister," Elise said, her voice quiet. "She was deaf. I used to translate for her." Claude, sensing the shift in power but misreading the room entirely, tried to step back in. I apologize, Mr. Moretti. This waitress is unauthorized to— Shut up, Dante said, without looking at him. He reached into his jacket pocket. The bodyguards tensed. Claude flinched, but Dante didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a heavy, black titanium credit card and slammed it on the table. Manager, Dante said, bring us the soup, no mushrooms, and the veal for my mother. Cut it into small pieces. Yes, sir, Claude squeaked. And, Dante added, his eyes still fixed on Elise. This woman is no longer your waitress. Elise's heart stopped. She needed this job. Sir, please, I didn't mean to offend. She is sitting with us, Dante interrupted. He kicked out the chair next to him. Sit. I can't, Elise whispered. I'm on the clock. Dante looked at Claude. Is she on the clock? Claude was shaking so hard he looked like he was vibrating. No, sir. She is on break. Indefinitely. Whatever you want. Dante looked back at Elise and gestured to the chair. It wasn't a request. Elise sat. As she lowered herself into the velvet chair, she felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her. She was sitting at the right hand of the devil himself. Across from her, Lucia Moretti reached out and took Elise's hand, giving it a squeeze. What is your name? Lucia signed. Elise, she signed back. Elise, Lucia signed, her eyes glistening. You are an angel sent to a table of sinners. Elise glanced sideways at Dante. He was watching her hands with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He poured a glass of wine, a 1982 Petrus, and slid it toward her. Drink, Dante said. We have a lot to talk about, Elise. Under the table, Elise's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ignored it. But if she had looked, she would have seen a text message from an unknown number. They found you. Run. But it was too late. She was already in the wolf's den. The dinner was a surreal blur of candlelight, fear, and unexpected warmth. For the next hour, Elise Bennett wasn't a waitress. She was the voice of a woman who had been silenced for decades. The food arrived, veal Milanese for Lucia, cut into delicate bite-sized squares, and a truffle risotto for Elise that smelled like heaven. Dante didn't eat. He watched. His gaze was heavy, dissecting Elise's every movement, every sign, every smile she exchanged with his mother. Ask him if he remembers the blue bicycle, Lucia signed, her eyes dancing with mischief. Elise hesitated, looking at the stone-faced man across from her. Your mother asks, if you remember the blue bicycle? Dante's hand paused on his Scotch glass. A flicker of something human passed behind his eyes. The one I crashed into the pond when I was 7? Elise relayed this to Lucia. The old woman threw her head back in a silent laugh, clapping her hands together. Tell him he cried for 2 days because he thought he drowned the frogs, Lucia signed. Elise couldn't help it. A small giggle escaped her lips as she translated. Dante looked at Elise. The sound of her laugh seemed to catch him off guard. It was light, melodic, and entirely out of place in his dark world. I did not cry, Dante corrected, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward by a millimeter. I was mourning the loss of transportation. For a moment, the restaurant faded away. It was just a son, a mother, and the bridge between them. But reality has a way of crashing in. Claude, the manager, approached the table with the bill. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting toward the front entrance. Mr. Moretti? Claude stammered. The meal is on the house, of course. A pleasure serving you. Dante didn't look at the check. He looked at Claude's hands. They were shaking, not the nervous shake of a man afraid of his boss, but the frantic tremble of a man who knows a bomb is about to go off. Dante's instincts, honed by years of surviving gang wars, screamed danger. Leo, Dante said sharply to his head of security, who was standing 6 feet away. Car, now. Leo spoke into his earpiece. Boss, we have a situation. A black van just pulled up to the curb. No plates. Engine running. Dante stood up instantly, buttoning his jacket. The casual dinner atmosphere evaporated. He was the Don again. Mother, we are leaving. Elise, come with us. I have to finish my shift, Elise said, confused by the sudden shift in energy. You don't have a shift, Dante growled. He grabbed Elise's upper arm, firmly, but not painfully. You are coming with me. Why? Elise pulled back. Because, Dante said, his eyes scanning the windows. Claude just sold us out. Before Elise could process the words, the front window of L'Oubli shattered. Glass rained down on table 1. Customers screamed and dove under tables. The sound of automatic gunfire ripped through the air, chewing up the mahogany paneling where Dante's head had been seconds before. Down! Dante roared. He shoved Elise and his mother to the floor, covering them with his own body. The world turned into chaos. Screams, shattering crystal, and the deafening pop, pop, pop of suppressed rifles. Leo, get them to the kitchen exit, Dante shouted, pulling a sleek handgun from his holster with practiced fluidity. He fired 2 shots toward the broken window, suppressing the attackers. Leo and another bodyguard, a giant man named Rocco, grabbed Lucia and Elise. Move! Move! Leo barked. Elise was hyperventilating. Her ears were ringing. She was being dragged through the kitchen, past terrified chefs and steaming pots of pasta. They burst out into the back alley, the cold rain hitting Elise's face like icy needles. Dante's armored Escalade screeched around the corner. Get inside, Dante ordered, shoving Lucia into the back seat. Elise was about to follow when a shadow detached itself from the dumpster. A man in a ski mask lunged at her. He didn't have a gun. He had a knife, and he wasn't trying to kill her. He was trying to grab her. Got the girl, the attacker shouted into a radio. Elise screamed as a rough hand tangled in her hair, yanking her back. No, let me go. Dante turned. He was 10 feet away, ushering his mother into the car. He saw the man grab Elise. A darkness descended over Dante's face that was far more terrifying than the gunfire. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He moved with the terrifying speed of a viper. Dante closed the distance in 2 strides. He grabbed the attacker's wrist, twisting it until the bone snapped with a sickening crunch. The knife clattered to the wet pavement. The attacker howled, but Dante silenced him with a brutal knee to the gut, followed by a pistol whip to the temple. The man crumbled like a wet paper bag. Dante grabbed Elise, who was sobbing, and threw her into the Escalade. He dove in after her and slammed the heavy door just as bullets sparked against the bulletproof glass. Go, Dante yelled to the driver. The SUV roared down the alley, tires spinning on the wet asphalt, leaving the chaos of L'Oubli behind. Inside the car, the silence was heavy. Lucia was shaking, clutching her rosary beads. Elise was curled in the corner, hugging her knees, her apron stained with dirty rainwater. Dante sat opposite them, his gun still in his hand, his chest heaving slightly. He looked at Elise. His eyes were cold, calculating. "Who are you?" Dante demanded. Elise looked up, tears streaming down her face. I'm just a waitress." "Bullshit," Dante spat. "Those men back there, they weren't shooting at me. They were providing cover fire. The man in the alley, he didn't try to kill me. He tried to kidnap you." Elise froze. The text message. She scrambled for her phone with trembling hands. She unlocked the screen. The message from the unknown number stared back at her. "They found you. Run." "Give me the phone," Dante commanded. Elise hesitated. Dante reached out and took it from her hand. He read the text. Then he scrolled up. There were months of messages. "Pay us, Elise. Your sister's debt doesn't die with her. We know where you work. We're coming for the interest." Dante looked up from the phone. His expression had shifted from suspicion to realization. "Viktor Volkov," he muttered. "The Russian loan shark operating out of Brighton Beach." He tossed the phone back to her. "You owe money to the Volkov Bratva." "It was for Mia," Elise whispered, her voice breaking. "My sister. She had leukemia. The insurance. It wasn't enough. I went to a man who said he could help. I didn't know who he was. I borrowed 50,000. I've paid back 80. But they say I still owe 100 more." Dante ran a hand over his face. He looked at his mother. Lucia was watching Elise with wide, terrified eyes. She reached out and touched Elise's knee. "Are you hurt?" Lucia signed. Elise shook her head, sobbing. "No, I am sorry. I brought bad men to you." Lucia looked at Dante. She signed aggressively. "Help her. You have to help her." Dante looked out the window at the passing city lights. He was the head of the Moretti family. He didn't save stray kittens. He didn't intervene in other criminals' debt collections. It was bad for business. But he looked at the waitress. He saw the terror in her eyes, the same terror he had seen in his mother's eyes for years. And he remembered the way his mother had smiled at dinner. "We aren't going to your apartment," Dante said to the driver. "Take us to the estate." "What?" Elise gasped. "No, please, just let me out. I'll run. I won't bother you again." Dante leaned forward, invading her space. The scent of expensive scotch and gunpowder filled her senses. "You can't run from Volkov," Dante said, his voice low and dangerous. "He will find you, and he will sell you to pay off that debt. You have two choices, Elise. You can get out of this car and be dead by morning. Or you can come with me." Elise looked into his steel-grey eyes. She saw danger, yes, but she also saw a fortress. "Why would you help me?" she whispered. Dante glanced at his mother, who was holding Elise's hand tightly. "Because," Dante said, "you are the only person in 20 years who has made my mother feel heard. And for that, I would burn this entire city to the ground." The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a compound. Located on the cliffs of the Palisades, overlooking the Hudson River, it was surrounded by 12-foot walls, cameras, and men who looked like they ate raw meat for breakfast. The SUV pulled into the underground garage. Elise felt like she was stepping onto another planet. The garage was filled with cars that cost more than her entire lifetime's earnings. Ferraris, Aston Martins, and vintage Mercedes. "Leo," Dante barked as they exited the vehicle. "Get a clean team to the restaurant. Make sure the police report says it was a robbery gone wrong. I don't want Volkov knowing I have the girl yet." "Understood, boss," Leo nodded. Dante turned to Elise. "Follow me." He led them into an elevator that opened directly into a penthouse living room. The floors were marble, the ceilings were vaulted, and the view of the New York skyline was breathtaking. But Elise was too busy shaking to appreciate the architecture. A maid rushed forward to take Lucia's coat. Lucia, however, refused to leave Elise's side. She held on to Elise's arm, acting as a shield against her own son. "She stays," Lucia signed to Dante. "In the guest room next to mine." Dante sighed, loosening his tie. "Mother, I need to vet her first." "She stays," Lucia repeated, her signs sharp and angry. "She saved me from the donkey man." Dante pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fine, she stays." He turned to Elise. "Sit. Drink this." He poured a glass of brandy and shoved it into her hand. Elise took a sip. The liquid fire burned her throat, but it stopped the shaking. She looked around the room. It was cold, beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of life. No photos, no flowers, just black leather and chrome. "So," Dante said, leaning against the marble fireplace, "here is the situation. Volkov thinks he grabbed you. When his men wake up in the hospital, they will tell him I intervened. He will assume I took you as a prize or a hostage. Is that what I am? Elise asked, her voice gaining a little strength. A hostage? Dante studied her. She looked small in the oversized armchair, her messy bun falling apart, wisps of brown hair framing a face that was more beautiful than he had initially realized. Her eyes were large, expressive, and the color of honey. No, Dante said. You are an employee, a very expensive one. Elise blinked. What? My mother needs a companion, Dante said, pacing the room. I have hired nurses, translators, doctors. She hates them all. She thinks they pity her. But you laughed with her. You insulted someone for her. Dante stopped pacing and looked directly at her. I will pay off your debt to Volkov. Every cent. $130,000. Elise gasped. I can't pay you back. I make $12 an hour plus tips. I don't want your money, Dante said dismissively. I want your time. You will live here. You will accompany my mother everywhere. You will be her voice when I cannot be. You will ensure she is never treated like an invalid again. For how long? Elise asked. Until the debt is worked off. Or until I say otherwise. It was a deal with the devil. Elise knew that. She would be living in the home of a Mafia boss, surrounded by killers. But the alternative was Volkov, and a fate worse than death. Plus, she looked at Lucia. The old woman was watching her with hope in her eyes. Okay, Elise whispered. Good, Dante said, but there are rules. He walked closer, towering over her. Rule 1. You do not leave this estate without my permission. Rule 2. You see nothing. You hear nothing. What happens in this house stays in this house. Rule 3. He paused, his voice dropping to a velvety rumble that sent a shiver down Elise's spine. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, warm, and dangerous. Rule 3. You never, ever lie to me. If Volkov contacts you, if you remember something else, you tell me. If you betray me, Elise, there is no place on earth you can hide. Elise nodded, unable to speak. Good, Dante said, pulling back. Leo will show you to your room. There are clothes in the closet. Tomorrow, we go shopping. You can't look like a homeless person if you're walking next to a Moretti. As Dante turned to leave, Lucia tapped Elise's shoulder. He likes you, Lucia signed with a smirk. Elise's face flushed red. He terrified me, she signed back. He is a bear, Lucia signed. Loud roar, but soft fur. Elise watched Dante's broad back as he walked onto the balcony, lighting a cigarette. Soft fur, she doubted it. But as she watched the smoke curl up into the night sky, she realized that for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't worrying about how to pay the electric bill. She had traded one cage for another, but this cage was golden, and the beast guarding it was fascinating. The next morning, the house was a flurry of activity. Elise woke up in a bed that was larger than her entire apartment. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a second, she thought it was a dream. Then she saw the clothes laid out on the chaise lounge. Not a waitress uniform, but a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. She dressed and made her way downstairs. The smell of espresso filled the air. In the kitchen, Dante was sitting at the island, reading a tablet. He was wearing a casual black t-shirt that showed off arms covered in intricate tattoos, ink she hadn't seen under his suit. He looked younger, dangerous, and ruggedly handsome. Sit, he said without looking up. Eat. A plate of eggs and fruit was placed before her by a silent cook. Where is your mother? Elise asked. Sleeping. She had a rough night, Dante said. He put the tablet down. "We need to talk about your sister." Elise froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Why?" "Because Volkov isn't just a loan shark," Dante said. "He uses debt to leverage people into trafficking. He didn't just want your money, Elise. He wanted you. He had a buyer lined up." Elise felt sick. "A buyer?" "A cartel lieutenant in Mexico," Dante said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "I found the messages on the phone of the man I broke last night." Elise dropped her fork. It clattered loudly on the plate. She wrapped her arms around herself. "Oh God." Dante stood up and walked around the island. He stopped next to her chair. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a physical weight. "You are safe here," Dante said firmly. "I have already sent a message to Volkov." "What message?" "I burned down his warehouse in Queens an hour ago," Dante said. Elise's eyes widened. You committed arson." "I sent a cease and desist letter," Dante corrected dryly. "In my language." Suddenly the front door burst open. A man stormed in, tall, blonde, with a face that looked like it had been punched a few times but was still charming. This was Silas, Dante's consigliere and best friend. "Dante!" Silas yelled. "We have a problem. The commission is calling. They're asking why half of Queens is on fire." Silas stopped when he saw Elise. He looked from her to Dante, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Well, well," Silas drawled. "Is this the Helen of Troy that launched 1,000 ships? Or in this case, 1,000 gallons of gasoline?" "Elise, this is Silas," Dante said, sounding annoyed. "Ignore him. He is an idiot." "I'm the lawyer," Silas winked at Elise. "Hi. Nice to meet the woman who finally made Dante lose his cool. I owe you a drink." "Silas, shut up," Dante warned. "So," Silas leaned against the counter. "Volkov is pissed. He's calling a sit-down. He claims you stole his property." "She is not property," Dante growled. The venom in his voice surprised even him. "Legally in our world, debt is transferable," Silas pointed out. "If you want to keep her, Dante, you have to buy her contract, officially, before the commission." Dante looked at Elise. She was pale, looking between the two men like a tennis ball. "Set up the meeting," Dante said. "Are you sure?" Silas asked, his smile fading. "Meeting Volkov on neutral ground. It's a trap, Dante. You know that." "I know," Dante said. He looked at Elise again. "But I'm not giving her back." Elise felt a strange flutter in her chest. It wasn't fear this time, it was something else. She had spent her whole life being invisible, being used, being a burden. And here was the most dangerous man in the city, preparing to walk into a trap just to keep her. "Why?" Elise asked again, softly. Dante didn't answer. He just checked his watch. "Get ready, Elise. You're coming with me." "To the meeting?" Silas asked, shocked. "Are you insane?" "No," Dante said. "To the hospital. My mother has an appointment, and after last night, I'm not letting Elise out of my sight." The neutral ground for the sit-down was, ironically, a church. Specifically, the basement of St. Jude's in Brooklyn, a place where the Irish mobs and Italian families had settled disputes for 50 years. The air smelled of damp stone, incense, and old blood. Dante hadn't wanted to bring Elise. It was against every protocol he had. But Volkov had been specific. "Bring the girl, or I burn the rest of your city." Elise wore a black trench coat Dante had bought her, buttoned to her chin. She stood behind Dante's right shoulder, her eyes fixed on the floor. To her left stood Silas, checking his watch, and Leo, whose hand never left the grip of his semi-automatic. "He's late," Silas muttered. "It's a power play." "He'll be here," Dante said, his voice stripped of all emotion. He was in architect mode, cold, calculating, and lethal. The heavy iron doors groaned open. Viktor Volkov entered. He was a bear of a man, with a shaved head scarred by shrapnel and gold teeth that glinted in the dim light. He was flanked by 6 men, all heavily armed. But what caught Elise's attention was the woman walking beside him. She was tall, severe, and watching everything with hawk-like intensity. Volkov sat at the wooden table in the center of the room. He gestured for Dante to sit. "Dante Moretti," Volkov boomed, his Russian accent thick. "You look well for a man who started a war this morning." "I didn't start a war, Victor," Dante said, sitting slowly. "I took out the trash. There is a difference." Volkov laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Always the arrogance. You burned my inventory. You took my asset." He pointed a thick finger at Elise. "That little bird owes me money, and she owes me services." Elise shivered. Dante didn't flinch, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "The debt is settled," Dante said, sliding a heavy envelope across the table. 130,000, cash, plus 20% for your inconvenience regarding the warehouse. Volkov didn't even look at the money. He kept his eyes on Elise. "I don't want the money," Volkov sneered. "I have a buyer in Juarez who pays double for pretty American girls with no family. She is promised. She is under my protection," Dante said softly, "which means she is no longer your concern. Take the money, Victor. Walk away." Volkov leaned forward. "Or what? You kill me? Here? On holy ground? The commission would have your head." While the men spoke, Elise's gaze drifted to the woman standing next to Volkov. The woman was staring at Leo, Dante's head of security. Then Elise saw it. The woman's hand, hanging by her side, moved. It wasn't a twitch. It was a sign, rapid, subtle finger, spelling against the fabric of her pants. BAACKDOOR-OPEN. Elise's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked at Leo. Leo wasn't looking at the woman. He was looking at the door. But then Leo tapped his thigh twice. Acknowledged. Elise felt the world tilt. Leo wasn't just a bodyguard. He was the mole. He was communicating with Volkov's second-in-command using a tactical sign language. She looked at Dante. He was focused entirely on Volkov, unaware that the knife was already at his throat. Volkov slammed his fist on the table. "No deal! I take the girl now, and maybe I leave you alive." The scraping of chairs echoed as Volkov's men reached for their weapons. Dante's hand went to his waistband. Elise stepped forward. She didn't mean to, but instinct took over. She grabbed Dante's shoulder. "Don't trust Leo!" she screamed. The silence that followed lasted a microsecond, but it felt like an hour. Leo's eyes went wide. He spun around, raising his gun not at Volkov, but at Dante. "Traitor!" Silas yelled, diving across the table. Dante was faster than humanly possible. He didn't question Elise. He didn't hesitate. As soon as she said the name, he dropped to the floor, dragging Elise with him, and fired 3 shots upward from beneath the table. Bang! 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 2 of Volkov's men went down. Leo fired, the bullet shattering the stone pillar where Dante's head had been a second before. Silas tackled Leo, and they crashed into a pile of old pews. "Get to the exit!" Dante roared, shoving Elise toward the side door. "The back door is open," Elise cried out, remembering the sign. "They let them in," Dante cursed. He changed direction, grabbing Elise's wrist and hauling her toward the confessional booths. "This way." Gunfire erupted from the back of the room as a second wave of Volkov's men poured in through the door Leo had left unsecured. The basement turned into a kill box. Dante kicked open a ventilation grate behind the confessional. "Crawl! Go!" "I'm not leaving you!" Elise sobbed, the noise of the guns deafening her. Dante grabbed her face, his hands smeared with dust and blood. "Elise, listen to me. You just saved my life. Do not let them take that away from me. Go to the car. Drive to the precinct. Get help." "No," she whispered. Dante looked at her, his eyes blazing. He kissed her, hard, desperate, a promise of violence and devotion wrapped in one. Then he shoved her into the vent and turned back to the chaos, his dual pistols raising to meet the oncoming storm. Elise didn't go to the police. She knew the police were on Volkov's payroll. Dante had told her as much. She crawled through the vents, emerging in the alleyway behind the church. The rain was pouring down. She could hear the muffled gunfight below. She saw Dante's Escalade, but the driver was slumped over the wheel, dead. She needed to get back to the estate. Lucia was there. If Leo was a traitor, then the security at the house was compromised. Volkov wouldn't just hit the meeting. He would hit the heart of the family. Elise fumbled for the keys in the dead driver's pocket, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She started the massive SUV and peeled out, driving like a maniac toward the Palisades. The drive took 40 minutes. When she arrived at the Moretti gates, her worst fears were realized. The gate was wide open. The guard booth was empty. Elise killed the headlights. She drove the car into the bushes near the perimeter wall and ran the rest of the way on foot, slipping on the wet grass. The front door of the mansion was ajar. Elise slipped inside. The house was dark, the power cut. She moved silently through the foyer, stepping over shattered vases. "Find the old woman," a voice rasped from the living room. "Volkov wants her alive. She's the leverage." Elise froze. Two men were sweeping the ground floor with flashlights. Lucia. Elise knew where Lucia would be. The library. It was her sanctuary. Elise took off her shoes. She moved in her socks, creeping up the grand staircase. She had to be quieter than a shadow. She was a waitress. She had spent years moving unnoticed through crowded rooms. This was no different. She reached the library door. It was locked from the inside. Elise knelt by the keyhole. She couldn't knock. The men downstairs would hear. She couldn't call out. She slipped a piece of paper from her pocket, an old receipt, and slid it under the door. Then she waited. Nothing. She retrieved a pen from a hallway table and tapped on the floorboard. A rhythmic vibration. Thump, thump, thump. Inside the room, Lucia Moretti sat in her armchair, a shotgun across her lap. She couldn't hear the men destroying her home. She couldn't hear the storm outside, but she felt the vibration in the floor. Lucia looked at the door. She saw the paper slide back out. On it, written in shaky handwriting, was one word: Elise. Lucia unlocked the door. Elise slipped inside and locked it behind her. Lucia looked at Elise's disheveled state, the blood on her coat, the terror in her eyes. She didn't panic. The old woman's face hardened into a mask of resolve. "Where is my son?" Lucia signed. "Fighting," Elise signed back. "Bad men are here. Leo betrayed us." Lucia's eyes narrowed. She spat on the floor. "Leo. I never liked his shoes. Too shiny." Elise almost laughed, hysteria bubbling in her chest. "We need to hide." "No," Lucia signed. She stood up, racking the shotgun with a surprising amount of strength. "This is my house. We fight. There are too many," Elise pleaded. "We need to signal Dante." Lucia paused. She looked at the heavy velvet drapes covering the window that overlooked the valley. "The lighthouse," Lucia signed. Elise was confused. "What?" "The security system has a silent alarm," Lucia explained, her hands moving fast. "But the power is cut. We have to light the beacon manually. On the roof, it tells the family soldiers in the city that the keep has fallen." Elise nodded. "Show me." Dante Moretti was bleeding from a graze on his ribs, but he was alive. Silas was limping beside him. They had cleared the church basement, leaving a trail of bodies, including the traitor Leo, who had died with a look of shock on his face when Silas put a bullet in his chest. They were speeding down the highway in a stolen sedan. "Call the house again," Dante barked, driving 120 miles per hour. "No answer," Silas said, grimacing as he pressed a towel to his bleeding shoulder. "The line is dead." Dante gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "If they touch her, if they touch either of them." "Look," Silas pointed out the windshield. Ahead, on the cliffs of the Palisades, a light cut through the storm. It was a rhythmic, flashing beam from the roof of the Moretti estate. ... Dash. ... "The beacon," Dante whispered. Mother triggered the distress signal. "That means they're alive," Silas said. "But it means the house is breached." Dante floored the accelerator. "Call everyone. The captains, the soldiers, the street crews. Everyone converges on the estate. Tonight, we finish this." Back at the estate, Elise and Lucia were pinned down. They had made it to the roof to light the old emergency floodlight, fueled by a generator, but Volkov's men had spotted them. They were now barricaded in the master bedroom. The heavy oak doors were splintering under the blows of a sledgehammer. "Open up!" a mercenary shouted. "We just want the old lady." Lucia sat on the bed, reloading the shotgun. She looked at Elise. "You are brave," Lucia signed. "My son chose well." Elise was crying silently. "I'm scared, Lucia." Lucia reached out and cupped Elise's face. "Fear is useful. It keeps you fast, but do not let it freeze you." The door exploded inward. 2 men burst in. Lucia fired. The buckshot caught the first man in the chest, throwing him back into the hallway. The recoil nearly dislocated Lucia's shoulder, but she held on. The second man lunged. Elise grabbed a heavy brass lamp and swung it with all her might. It connected with the man's head with a sickening crunch. He staggered, but a third man entered. Volkov himself. He backhanded Elise, sending her flying into the wall. She tasted copper. Volkov grabbed Lucia by the throat and lifted her off the bed. "Enough games, babushka!" "No!" Elise screamed, scrambling to her feet. Volkov pointed a gold-plated desert eagle at Elise. "Stay down, waitress, or I paint the walls with your brains." Suddenly, a thunderous crash shook the house. Then another, and another. The sound of breaking glass and automatic gunfire erupted from the floor below. It sounded like an army had arrived. Volkov froze. He dragged Lucia to the balcony doors. "He's here!" Dante kicked the bedroom door off its remaining hinge. He stood there, a demon in a ruined suit, a submachine gun in each hand. Behind him stood Silas and a dozen Moretti soldiers. "Let her go, Victor," Dante said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Volkov backed onto the balcony, dragging Lucia with him into the rain. He held the gun to her temple. "Drop the weapons!" Volkov screamed. "Or I kill the mother!" Dante hesitated. He dropped the guns. Okay, just look at me." "I want a helicopter," Volkov yelled, backing up against the railing. "And I want the girl to come with me as insurance." Elise stood up. She looked at Dante. Then she looked at Lucia. Lucia's hands were pinned by Volkov's arm, but her fingers were free. She was signing something against Volkov's chest, where only Elise and Dante could see. D-U-C-K. Elise's eyes widened. She looked at Dante. He gave a microscopic nod. "Take me!" Elise shouted, stepping forward. "Let her go! Take me!" Volkov laughed. "I take both." "Now!" Elise screamed. She dove to the floor. Lucia, with the strength of a desperate mother, stomped on Volkov's foot with her heel and threw her body weight downward. At the exact same instant, Dante pulled a backup pistol from his ankle holster. The movement was a blur. Bang! The shot was impossible. It had to miss Lucia's thrashing head by inches. The bullet struck Volkov right between the eyes. The Russian boss crumbled backward over the balcony railing, falling 3 stories into the stormy dark below. Lucia collapsed on the wet stone of the balcony. "Mama!" Dante sprinted forward, falling to his knees beside her. He checked her for injuries, his hands shaking for the first time that night. Lucia pushed him away, coughing. She sat up and adjusted her dress. "You are late," she signed sternly. Dante let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her silver hair. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." Elise watched them from the doorway, leaning against the frame, her body aching. She felt like an intruder on a sacred moment. She turned to leave, to go. Somewhere. Anywhere. "Elise." Dante's voice stopped her. He stood up and walked over to her. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, at the bruise forming on her cheek, the blood on her clothes, the fierce determination in her honey eyes. He cupped her face with both hands. "You stayed," he whispered. I couldn't leave her," Elise stammered. "You saved us," Dante said. "You saw the signs. You saved us all." He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't like the desperate kiss in the church. This was slow, tender, and claiming. It tasted of rain and survival. 3 weeks later. The damage to L'Oubli had been repaired. The restaurant was closed for a private event. Elise sat at table 1. She wore a dress of emerald silk that fit her curves perfectly. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. Lucia sat across from her, looking elegant in a new suit, happily devouring a plate of mushroom-free risotto. Dante walked in. He looked different, lighter. The weight of the Volkov War was gone. The city was quiet. The message had been sent. Do not touch the Morettis. He sat down next to Elise. He placed a velvet box on the table. "What is this?" Elise asked. "Your contract," Dante said. Elise's heart dropped. "Oh, is the debt paid? Open it." Elise opened the box. Inside was not a piece of paper. It was a key, an ancient, heavy iron key. "It's the key to the estate," Dante said. "Not as a guest, not as an employee." He took her hand. Silas drew up the papers, Dante continued. "Your debt is gone. Your sister's medical bills are paid in full. You have a trust fund that will last you a lifetime. You are free, Elise. You can walk out that door and never see me again." Elise looked at the key. Then she looked at Dante. "But?" she asked. "But," Dante said, his thumb stroking her knuckles, "my mother would miss you terribly." "I am right here," Lucia signed, chewing a piece of bread. "And yes, I would miss you." "He's boring without you," Dante smiled. "And I would miss you. I don't know how to do this, Elise. I don't know how to be gentle. But with you, the silence isn't heavy. It's peaceful." Elise closed her fingers around the key. She thought about her old life, the loneliness, the fear, the invisible waitress wiping tables. Then she looked at the man who had burned down a city for her, and the mother who had fought a gunman by her side. She wasn't invisible here. She was seen. Elise turned to Lucia and raised her hands. "Is it okay if I stay?" She signed. Lucia beamed, her eyes crinkling. "Only if you promise to interpret for me when he is being a donkey." Elise laughed. She turned to Dante. "I'm keeping the key," she said. Dante let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Good, because I wasn't going to let you leave anyway." "Is that a threat, Mr. Moretti?" "No," Dante whispered, brushing her lips with his. "It's a promise." As they kissed, Lucia clapped her hands silently, then picked up her wine glass to toast the empty room. The shy waitress, the deaf mother, and the Mafia boss. It was a strange family, forged in fire and silence, but it was theirs. And in a city of noise, They had found the only thing worth listening to. Love. And that is the incredible story of Elise and the Moretti family. It just goes to show that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is the one that doesn't speak a word. Elise didn't just translate a menu that night. She translated the love between a mother and son that had been lost in translation for years. If you enjoyed this story of danger, romance, and the power of sign language, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Question for you guys. If you were in Elise's shoes, would you have run away at the church or gone back to save the mother? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.